I have done my fair share of reading, as you can probably tell from this bookshelf. However, there was a period where I lost motivation to read, which is why I made it my goal to start reading again. So recently, I've gotten into reading, and it has become one of my favorite pastimes, if not the. So today I thought it would be really cool to share with you guys some books that I've been reading. We're going to start with a selection. I'm kind of scared to start with this because I know you either love it or you hate it, which I did not even realize until after I had read the book that people actually don't like this. I thought it was like a really popular book on Book Talk. Anyway, did I just say Book Talk? Yeah, okay. This book is so good. It is not the most groundbreaking plot ever. However, I fell in love with this book. I finished it in less than a day, which is a record for me. And it was in the beginning when I was just starting to get back into reading. I guess it's not a spoiler if I say that this book has a royal aspect to it. And I think that was a big part of why I loved the book. I just went through it so fast. It was really easy to read. I think it targets younger audiences, which is probably why it was more light. It is a more light book. I've heard a few people compare the plot to The Bachelor, so if you like that, maybe you'll like this one. It was really interesting, like the society that was built in it, and also there was one character that I absolutely adore, who I will not mention because I don't want to influence your opinion if you have not read it, but if you have read it, you probably know who I'm talking about. That character, I adore them. Really, really, really want to read the next one. I think it was like revisiting a time in my life when Barbie movies were everything to me, and that's probably why I enjoyed it so much too, is because it was all about being a princess. It was like Princess to Pauper. No, wait, it was like Pauper to Princess, basically. And I can express how much I adore this series. And there's a movie coming out. The movie, so many expectations to be fulfilled. I cannot wait to get my hands on the second book so I can continue the plot, because I feel very incomplete. I really want to continue the story. So there. Shall I read like a note from this book? Because I have a few notes at the back. Okay, one note I will read is that Mason deserves better. Okay. Okay. Next book, Serpent and Dove. This one is also a very polarizing book. Am I using that word correctly? I saw this book all over Book Talk, and that's pretty much where I get most of my recommendations now. You either like the selection, love it, or hate it. There was really no middle ground. It was described as enemies to lovers, and I was like, okay. Okay, wait, let me talk about that for a second. Do you guys like enemies to lovers or friends to lovers? Because I don't know what it is. I kind of like the romance in the selection much more than Serpent and Dove, and not just because of how it was written, but because of the relationship. I think one of the relationships in this book, the selection, is so sweet. So this was advertised as enemies to lovers across Book Talk, and people were like saying this is the worst enemies to lovers book ever. Other people were saying that it was like a great enemies to lovers, and I was really interested to see where I fit on that spectrum. So I got it, and I was excited when I saw it because I was like, oh cool, there it is. I think I'm in the middle ground with it. It is not the best book I've ever read, but it is not that bad. It's an okay book. I think the magic... Ooh, am I allowed to say that? Okay, well, it's not a spoiler that one of the characters is a witch, and I think the magic of this universe is really interesting. I like how there are rules to the magic of this book. I think it made the plot much more interesting, and also much more structured and realistic in a way. I don't think this was as hit or miss as I made it out to be in my head, but that being said, it also wasn't the biggest hit for me. Though I did enjoy all the little details and stuff, but I think comparing it to the selection, I definitely was more involved or interested in the plot of this one. Also, I don't feel like reading the second book just because I think this book was okay for me already, and I've heard that the second book wasn't as good, so that is why I will not be reading the second book. But this book in itself was okay. Okay, next book. You'll see like a pattern here. These are more of the more popular book talk recommendations, but the third book I read is The Cruel Prince. I had a lot of expectations for this one. Well, not okay. Well, that's a little much. I was excited to read this one because, as I put in my notes, the plot seems super cool, and I was interested about reading fairies, mermaid, cruel leader type of stuff. This book was good. The world was really, really interesting to me. Like the characters and the universe that they were in, at least the way I imagined it, I think are really, really cool. It is very, very whimsical kind of thing. I liked it actually. It was more of like a light fantasy world, I think, because like the selection, it was targeted, or it targeted younger audiences. But the story was cool, the characters were cool, and it was overall a cool book. It wasn't my favorite book, but I would read the second book. Also, I feel kind of cool reading this book because, or this book and the selection book, because these are more popular, and whenever people bring up characters in them in like the comments of book talks, I feel included because I know what they're talking about. So that's also another thing. This is like more of a mainstream book, which I think was a good way to introduce me more into the world of reading. Okay, next book is more of an underground book talk suggestion. I saw one TikTok user suggest it. I was like, okay, I want to read that book. And that book is The Inheritance Games. Really, really nice cover. I'm just gonna say that off the bat. The cover is so, so pretty. This book really intrigued me. The plot was really interesting to me. I was watching Knives Out with my friend Chloe the other day, and I told her that Knives Out is like a mixture of this book plus the board game Clue. So if that like intrigues you a little bit, yeah, that's what I thought of the relationship between the two. It's really interesting. It's about this billionaire, Tobias Hawthorne, who basically gave up his inheritance to a random girl, and that really interested me. I love the aesthetic of it, like just the cover itself, and also the world was really interesting to read about. The plot was also interesting. I will say this, I have a few unanswered questions, and I feel like the plot wasn't super solved yet, but there is a second book in which I think all my questions hopefully will be answered, and which I am looking forward to reading. I had a lot of notes about this book because there is a lot to absorb. There's also one character in this book that I like a little bit more than the other. Okay, well, do I spoil it? I'll spoil it a little bit. There is a love triangle in this book, and I prefer one more than the other, as I think usually goes in a love triangle. There's just a lot. It's like you would want to learn more about the lives of the characters in this book because their lives are so interesting. Like the way 4 characters were brought up is really interesting. I think I at least was curious to know more about their upbringing and how they apply that now that they're older. I'll read one of the notes. I said I like the chess, science, strategy, probability, problem solving, and critical thinking aspects of this book. There's a lot of that in here, a lot of riddles, and yeah, you can kind of get a few details of the book in the cover itself. So there we go. Interesting book, would read again. All these books so far I think I would read again. Anyway, if you're looking for a more underground book to read, I would suggest this. I think it's interesting, and you might enjoy it if you like Knives Out. The plot is not entirely similar, but the vibes are. Okay, next one. This one I have a very love-hate relationship with. Pride and Prejudice. I went through a phase where I had watched Pride and Prejudice and I was going on a Little Women streak. I watched the movies again and I was just absorbed or invested in worlds that were very old-timey, set in a farm, like that kind of vibe. Not set in a farm, but you know what I mean, like grass everywhere. Anyway, so then I put Pride and Prejudice on my to be read book list. I was really excited to read this. As you can see, I have quite a few notes, more notes than I usually do. The first half of this book was excruciating to get through. There were moments where I was just like, I don't want to finish this book anymore. I just want to put it down and move on to the next book because it was taking me months. I started this book in December or December 31st and finished it March 16. I thought I was in a reading slump. No, I was in a reading slump with the first half of this book because the writing took some getting used to. Not some, took a lot of getting used to. And also the storytelling. However, once I got past the first half of the book where they basically set up everything and introduce all the characters, the second half was a lot more interesting and I enjoyed it a lot more. I was more invested in the story and I was glad I stuck through because it is a good book. And I find myself like thinking, is it my favorite book? But I don't think so, just because I don't know how much of that is true. But this book was really interesting. It is the blueprint enemies to lovers, as most people say. Also, I think a big factor of this book that made me not like it was the fact that in the first half I was really rooting for one couple more than the main couple, because I did not feel anything for them at first. I'm sorry. But when the second half came around, I was like, oh, okay, I see the chemistry. I think watching the movie also helped a lot with the world building of this book. It helped me visualize a lot more and also helped me sort of identify what was happening a lot quicker than I probably would have if I did not watch the movie. I also found myself talking like them while reading this book because they do talk in a dated manner. So is it dated? I don't know if I'm wording that right, but you know what I mean, like they have a different way of structuring their sentences and I found myself following those structures. Like a lot of my notes are me just saying, it's taking me a while to get used to the writing, and also it was only towards the end that I was really able to establish which house was which, because they named their houses right. And at first I kept getting confused on which is which because they refer to them and I never really know which one they're talking about. But it was also like that for a few of the family members. I wasn't sure whose side it was. At times I was even like, oh wait, yeah, that's the tita, or the aunt. So glad I stuck through this book and so glad I was able to read it. I think it really is a good book. It's very timeless actually, as written on the back. Like I said in my notes, this was truly a good book and I loved the world it put me in. It was as if I was transported to their society, but at the same time reminded me of its likeness to my own. I really liked this book, its humor, its reality, its characters, and its story. And so if you're willing to just push through the first half of this book, I highly encourage you pick this up and read it because it is a classic. Is it a classic? And it has a good story. And I enjoyed it. I never thought I would say that. I seriously thought I would just like put it down and forget about it forever. Now, breaking past these kind of YA sort of fiction books. This is also fiction, but it is I separated from these books. The Alchemist. Now this book, first of all, has one of my favorite covers ever. I think it is such a fun cover. Like, that is just really pretty to me. And also, the plot interested me. It is a short book. It's a small, kind of almost pocket book. Not really, compared to my hand. It's not really a pocket book. But it is a shorter book compared to the ones that I've been reading. I stretched it out over a few weeks or a month, but I enjoyed it very, very much. It talks a lot about dreams and signs from the universe and kind of pursuing your passions. And I think the message of this book is really, really lovely. I wrote in my notes that this was a beautifully teaching and telling book about dreams and the things of the world beyond our regular control. I particularly connected to pages 135 to 136 because at the time I was kind of thinking about something, and then the book mentioned something very similar to what I was kind of thinking about, and was like, oh wow, and I noted it in my notes. Yeah, there is a lot to learn in this book, which is something that I really enjoyed about it. It wasn't just like a story. There was so much to pick up on and so much to absorb. Also, the main character's name is Santiago, but I forgot about it because it's never mentioned again in the books, or in the book. But when I reread the first page, I was like, Santiago, because they never mention that again. I don't know if they mention why in the book, but yeah, they don't mention his name again in the book. That is not as relevant as you might think, because you'll pretty much know who he is still throughout the book. But I'm just saying that that was a detail I noticed. Yes, I encourage you to read this book. I think it is really lovely. It was a nice break from the books that I had read, and I'm really glad that my dad picked this up for me. It was really unexpected actually when my dad got this for me, and I'm glad that he did. Now this is the last book for this video, and I think it's a good one. The last book is Lovely War. Now this book has been on my reading list for a bit now, and I finally was able to read it. I'm really happy that I was. This is a much taller book than usual, and it's also quite thick. But it is really, really easy to read. The chapters are actually quite short, so I think that was a big reason why it was kind of easy to go through the chapters. But the story in itself is really, really interesting. I really like how it's narrated by Greek gods. I think that the fact that they're narrating it adds so much more detail to the story, and I like how it was kind of broken up between the different gods and how they were able to tell different sides of the story. Despite it being really thick, I was really excited to read it because I thought that I just had a feeling that I would be able to go through it fast, and I did. I read this right after Pride and Prejudice. I was so ready to read another book after Pride and Prejudice, and finished it 10 days later. In this book, I never got bored, even though there was a lot to read. I was never bored, and I was able to follow the story really, really well, even though there are maybe sometimes jumps in time or the perspective changes. It was really easy to follow. And again, I really like the aspect of the narration being done by gods who have no sense of humanity. Their world is so different from ours and their experiences, and kind of them narrating the lives of humans in love and war was really interesting to read about. Also, the end of this book has a part where the author talks about the reality of parts of this book, which I have not completed, but I am noting to finish it. And second, has a list of questions that you can answer if you're part of like a book club, or if you just want to kind of understand deeper aspects of this book, which I find really, really nice to have. I like how this book was concluded, and I'm really, really glad that I picked this book up because it is a really nice book. Not many popular creators talk about this book, and I think it is a nice book to read if you're looking for something different than mine. But yes, those were all the books. Oh shoot! These are all the books that I've been reading so far, and comment down below if there are any that you've already read and how you found that book or those books, and also if there are any that you have not read and are interested in reading. Also, if you have any recommendations for me, feel free to leave them down below, and if you want to talk about any of these books, let's start conversations in the comments, because I don't have a lot of friends who have read these books, and having people to talk to them about would be really nice. So that is all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!